She couldn't speak, but her words held a power that crossed unforgivable lines. What desperate plea could a silent woman write that would not only reach but demand a response from a ruthless mafia boss? Prepare for a story where silence is broken and loyalty is tested in the most unexpected ways. Subscribe now. The city slept beneath a cold wash of moonlight, but inside a cramped studio apartment, Mara Vale sat awake, her fingers trembling over a sheet of paper she shouldn't have been writing on. The room was silent, as always, because silence had become her prison and her shield. Not a sound left her throat, not anymore. Her breaths came thinly, barely scraping past her lips, as she forced herself to finish the desperate plea she had been rewriting for hours. Please, I don't want to disappear. Someone is following me. Someone from before. I need help. I need protection. Please, before he finds me again. Her handwriting was shaky, the loops uneven, the lines slanting wildly. She'd lived in fear long, enough to know one thing. When a monster starts hunting again, no place stays safe. This message wasn't meant for a stranger. It was meant for a woman at the shelter who sometimes helped her translate written words into police reports she never had the courage to submit. But in her panic, her exhaustion, her trembling rush to be heard somehow, even without a voice, she slipped the letter into the wrong envelope. A deadly envelope, addressed to Adrian Luca, a man whose name alone made the city hold its breath, a mafia boss, a ruler of shadows, a man people begged to stay away from. Not a man you begged for help. By the time Mara realized her mistake, it was too late. The courier had already taken the outgoing mail. Her hands went to her mouth, panic flooding her chest. She shook her head violently, fingers digging into her scalp. No. She didn't have a voice to scream, but the terror inside her screamed for her. She had just sent a plea, her most vulnerable truth, to the most dangerous man in the city. Across the city, in a penthouse lined with glass and shadows, Adrian Luca stood in front of his desk, pouring himself a drink. His men were arguing about territory, alliances, and the usual, predictable nonsense that came with ruling the underworld. Adrian ignored them, until a small white envelope slid across his desk. His lieutenant murmured, "Boss, you should see this." Adrian didn't respond. He simply opened the envelope with the same calm precision he used when he dismantled enemies. He scanned the first line, then the second, then the final plea. His jaw tightened. Not in anger, not in amusement, but in something far quieter, something far more dangerous. He read it again, slower this time. A woman, mute, terrified, being hunted, begging him to protect her. And worst of all, this line, "I don't matter to anyone else. I know you won't care either. But I'm running out of places to hide." Adrian exhaled sharply, almost scoffing. "No one writes to me like this," he murmured. His lieutenant shifted. "Should we toss it? Probably some mistake." Adrian's fingers curled around the page. "No," he said softly. "No mistake like this exists." He reread the trembling handwriting, the raw fear in every stroke of ink. "Find her!" The room went silent. "Tonight?" his lieutenant asked quietly. Adrian's gaze hardened, obsidian and final. "Right now." In her tiny apartment, Mara startled when heavy boots echoed in her hallway. Her breath froze. Her pen fell from her fingers. Someone banged on her door, 3 sharp knocks. "Mara Vale?" a low voice called from the other side. She backed away, heart fracturing inside her chest. "We're here on behalf of Adrian Luca." The world dropped out from under her. The knocks didn't stop. "Mara Vale?" the voice repeated, lower this time, more controlled. "Open the door. We're not here to hurt you." Words meant nothing. Tone meant nothing. The world had taught Mara that danger could speak, softly. Her lungs burned as she backed away until her shoulder hit the wall. She squeezed her eyes, shut, willing herself invisible, willing the ground to swallow her, willing her legs not to collapse. A softer knock followed. "Miss Vale, our boss insists." She shook her head violently. No, please go." But she could not say the words, not aloud. Not after the night her voice broke forever. A heavy silence stretched. Then the lock clicked. They were picking it. Mara's knees almost buckled. Seconds later, the door swung open, revealing two towering men in dark coats, faces unreadable, eyes scanning the small apartment. One stepped forward. "Miss Vale?" Mara pressed herself deeper against the wall, hands trembling in front of her chest. The broader man lifted his palms. "We're here to escort you safely. Adrian Luca wants to speak. With you." Her fingers twitched at the sound of that name. Adrian Luca. The man who ruled the city from the shadows. The man whose reputation was carved from blood and silence. The man she had written to by mistake. Her breathing collapsed into panicked gasps. She shook her head, gesturing frantically, trying to form any sound, any protest, but nothing came out. Her throat clamped shut like a fist. The second man paused, watching her struggle. His eyes softened just slightly. "She can't speak," he murmured to the other. "It's in the letter." That made them both straighten. "Okay," the first said quietly. "We'll do this slowly." He extended his hand, not to grab her, but in offering. "Miss Vale, you're not in trouble. The boss just wants to understand what you wrote." A tremor passed through her. Her fingers twitched in refusal. The men exchanged a look. "She's terrified," the second muttered. "No wonder. You read that letter." A deep breath left the first man. Then he took off his gloves, kneeling to her eye level. "Listen, you asked for help." His voice lowered. "And you sent that plea to the one man who doesn't ignore words like that." She froze, confused. "What did that mean?" He continued. "He wants to hear your side. That's all. No threats. No punishment." Her heart hammered painfully. Did Adrian think she'd reached out intentionally? Did he believe she'd chosen him? Her fingers moved slowly, shakily, toward the notebook on her table. The men stepped back to give her space. She opened to a blank page and wrote with uneven strokes. "Please, I didn't mean to send it to him." When she turned the notebook to show them, they read it, exchanging a startled look. "That might complicate things," the first man murmured. The second exhaled. "But you still need protection. He'll want to hear this from you directly." Before she could react, the first man gently closed her notebook. "We're escorting you," he said. "Please don't make this harder on yourself." Her legs trembled uncontrollably, but she allowed them to guide her toward the hallway, because she had no choice. Two armed Mafia enforcers didn't leave empty-handed. As they escorted her into a sleek black SUV, the city lights blurred through her tears. Her hands shook so violently she had to press them between her knees. The car drove higher and higher into the wealthy districts until it approached a towering, modern penthouse building, the kind of place ordinary people never even stepped inside. Inside the elevator, one man whispered into his earpiece, "Boss, we have her." A low, cold voice replied, "Bring her to my office. I want to see her face when she tells me why she wrote that plea." Mara's blood turned to ice. When the elevator doors opened, a long corridor of marble and shadow stretched before her, and at the far end, a man stood waiting, tall, broad-shouldered, dark suit, darker eyes, a presence that filled the entire hallway. Adrian Luca. His gaze locked onto hers, sharp, assessing, unreadable. "Mara Vale," he said softly. "You wrote to me." Her knees almost gave out. Mara stood frozen at the threshold of Adrian Luca's office, breath shallow, fingers trembling as she clutched the edge of her coat. Everything about the room seemed too sharp, too vast, too quiet. Glass walls overlooking a sleeping city, marble floors that echoed even the softest movement, and a desk large enough to feel like a barrier between worlds. He watched her like a man studying a riddle written in blood. Adrian Luca didn't sit. He didn't blink. He simply stared. Her escorts released her gently, the door clicking shut behind them. The sound was final, enough to make Mara's stomach drop. He let the silence stretch, heavy, intentional, invasive. Most people rambled in his presence, filling the quiet with excuses or lies or terrified confessions. But Mara could only stand there, small and shaking, with nothing but her breath to give. Finally, he spoke. "You sent me a plea," he said, his voice smooth and lethal. "A message that would get anyone else killed for even attempting." Her throat tightened painfully. He stepped closer, only one pace, but it felt like the ground tilted. "When my men told me you were mute," he continued, "I thought it was an exaggeration. His eyes flicked over her face, reading everything she wasn't saying. But now I see it isn't. Her fingers twitched at her sides. She wanted to sink into the floor. She wanted to run. She wanted desperately to be believed. She reached for her notebook. Adrian raised a hand, not to stop her, just a slow, curious gesture. Go on. She opened the notebook to a blank page and wrote, each stroke unsteady. I didn't mean to send it to you. It was a mistake. I'm sorry. Please don't be angry. She showed him. He studied the words for a long moment, his face unreadable. A mistake, he repeated softly. You think that makes this less serious? Her breath hitched. Mara, he said, approaching another measured pace. Men who write to me either want money or mercy. Yours was neither. Her heartbeat thrashed in her ears. He continued. You begged for protection, from someone hunting you, someone who has found you before. Her fingers curled around the notebook, knuckles white. Adrian's voice softened, not kind but perceptive. Who is he? She flinched at the question, taking a half step back, shoulders curling inward. Her eyes darted toward the floor as memories flickered like broken film. Hands around her. Throat, a door slamming, the sound of her voice shattering on a scream that never came again. Adrian noticed. Every reaction, every breath, every wound she had tried to hide. Very slowly, he walked around his desk and leaned against it, folding his arms. I can't protect you without knowing the threat. Mara's hands began to shake so violently she couldn't write. She tried. The pen scratched against the page, making chaotic lines instead of letters. Tears welled, despite her effort to blink. Then back. Adrian's brows lowered as he watched her fall apart silently. And something in his expression shifted. Barely, but enough. Sit, he said quietly, motioning to the chair across from him. She hesitated. It's not a command, he added. It's an offer. That sentence alone stunned her. Slowly, carefully, she sat. Start at the beginning, he said. Her pen hovered. Her chest tightened. Then she wrote, tiny and crooked. He hurt me. I can't speak anymore because of him. And now he's back. Adrian read the words. His jaw flexed. A cold, lethal stillness settled over him. He looked up at her, eyes shadowed, dangerous. You should have sent this to a priest, he murmured. Or the police. A pause. But fate brought it to me instead. He stood to his full height. And I don't ignore pleas like this, Mara. She blinked, startled. But for me to help you... His voice dropped to a dark whisper. I need the rest of the truth. Her fingers trembled. She wasn't ready. She wasn't sure she ever would be. But he stepped closer, gaze burning through her defenses. I can see there's more. Mara closed her eyes, breath shaking. Her world was unraveling, and Adrian Luca was pulling the threads. The city lights shimmered far beneath the penthouse windows, but inside Adrian Luca's office, the air was thick with something far heavier than fear. Mara sat rigidly in the chair, notebook trembling in her hands, her silence screaming louder than any voice could. Adrian stood before her, not looming, not threatening, but calculating. As if he were rearranging pieces on an invisible chessboard, and she was a piece he wasn't sure belonged to him. Yet. Look at me, he said quietly. She lifted her gaze slowly. His eyes were sharp, unreadable, but there was a depth in them she didn't expect, something like controlled fire. You're terrified, he observed, but not of me. She swallowed hard. That was true. She feared the shadow trailing her, the monster from her past. Adrian was dangerous too, but his danger was different. Structured, deliberate, almost protective. He lowered himself into the chair opposite hers, elbows resting lightly on his knees. The proximity made her breath stutter. How long has he been stalking you? Adrian asked. Her fingers hesitated over the notebook. She wrote, 4 months. I moved twice. He always finds me. Adrian's jaw tightened. And before that? What did he do to your voice? The question stabbed through her. Flashbacks burst behind her eyelids, hands pinning her. Down! Screams locked in her throat, the crack of something inside her as her last words shattered. Her pen slipped from her grip. It clattered onto the marble floor. Adrian watched the panic rising inside her like a storm. but instead of pressing, he did. Something unexpected. He leaned back, giving her space. "You don't owe me the details," he said, voice low. "Not tonight." She blinked, startled. He wasn't demanding obedience. He wasn't forcing answers. He was waiting. "But you wrote to me," he went on softly. "And by doing that, accident or not, you made me responsible." Her heart lurched. She wrote quickly. "No, I didn't want you involved. Please, I don't want trouble for you." Adrian read the sentence, then let out a short, humorless breath. "You think you're trouble?" His voice dropped to a darker register. "Mara, I swim in trouble. I breathe it. What you're facing isn't trouble. It's a threat." He stood, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling window. The city glowed against his silhouette. "You're being hunted," he continued, "and you asked for help. Whether the letter was meant for me or not, I received it." A pause. "And I answer the things that reach me." Her eyes widened. Something warm, dangerously warm, spread in her chest. He turned back to her. "From now on, you stay under my protection." The air punched out of her lungs. She scribbled frantically. "I can't stay here. I'll bring danger to you. I don't want anyone hurt because of me." Adrian approached her again, slowly, measured. He lifted her chin gently, forcing her eyes to meet his. "Mara," he murmured. "I decide who gets to hurt me, and I don't lose to men who stalk women." Her breath shivered. "You staying here isn't a burden," he added. "It's a decision I'm making." She stared at him, chest rising and falling too fast. He released her gently and walked toward the phone on his desk. "You'll take the guest suite. My men will guard your floor." She shook her head desperately. No, you don't understand. I don't belong in your world." He cut her panic off with a look. "You belong anywhere you are unsafe," Adrian said, "which means under my roof." His voice dropped to something molten. "That is not up for negotiation." Her pulse thundered. He lifted the receiver. "Prepare the East Wing suite," he instructed, "and double the guards near the elevators." A beat. "Yes, tonight, she stays here." He hung up. Mara felt her world tilting, shifting, rearranging itself around a man she'd never meant to reach. Adrian stepped closer again, his presence enveloping her. "You have my protection now," he said. "But tomorrow, you'll tell me everything." Her breath trembled. "And then," he added softly, "I'll deal with the man who hurt you." The words weren't a threat. They were a promise. The east wing of Adrian Luca's penthouse was nothing like Mara had ever seen. Plush carpets muted her tentative footsteps, and heavy velvet curtains swallowed the city's lights, giving the sweet and almost unreal serenity. Yet serenity felt foreign. Her heartbeat refused to slow. Every creak, every shadow seemed alive, waiting. Adrian followed at a measured distance. His presence wasn't oppressive, it was constant. A predator, yes, but one who had chosen to linger rather than strike. "Here," he said softly, opening the door to the guest suite. Light spilled across silken sheets and polished wood, warm but alien. Mara hesitated. Her fingers twitched nervously over the notebook she still carried like armor. "You're safe," Adrian said, "for tonight." She shook her head. No, not safe, not truly, not anywhere. He studied her, expression unreadable, but his eyes burning with something she couldn't name. "I've had men follow me for years, Mara. I know fear, but I can handle it. You can't handle it. Alone. That's why you're here." Her fingers trembled as she opened the notebook and wrote, "I'm not used to anyone protecting me. Not like this." Adrian's lips curved slightly, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement. He didn't move closer, but the air between them seemed to hum. "You will be," he said, low, deliberate. "And if anyone touches you, they'll regret it." Her eyes met his, wide and unsure. She wanted to nod, wanted to believe him, but years of silence and terror had hardened her in ways words never could. A soft knock on the door drew both their attention. One of Adrian's men, shadowed and silent, appeared. "Everything is secure," he reported quietly. Adrian inclined his head. "Good. Leave us." The man disappeared, and the apartment fell back into that strange, thick quiet. Mara's pulse spiked. Adrian moved closer, leaning against the doorway. "You don't need to stay in that chair. Come, forward. Sit on the edge of the bed. It's better than standing frozen." Her legs trembled, but she obeyed. Slowly, cautiously. Every step felt like crossing a minefield. She perched on the edge, gripping her notebook to her chest. "Good," Adrian murmured. He stood nearby, his presence immense but controlled. "No one touches you tonight, not inside this building, not outside." She nodded slightly, unable to speak, but the gesture was enough. He lowered himself to sit on the chair across from her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him, but not close enough to crowd her. "You can't fight every battle alone," he said quietly. "Not all the time, and you don't have to. Some battles." His gaze hardened. "You survive because someone else fights for you." She blinked. She wanted to write, to tell him she didn't want anyone to fight for her, that she had always survived alone. But something in the way he looked at her, the mix of warning and care, froze her pen midair. The minutes stretched into silence, heavy but not threatening. Mara could hear her own heartbeat now, steadying, slow but certain. Finally, she lifted her pen, scribbling quickly. "Thank you. I don't know how to say it." Adrian read it, eyes softening almost imperceptibly. "You don't have to say it aloud," he said. "Silence suits you. But know this, tonight, you're not alone. And tomorrow." He let the pause linger. "We begin to fix the rest." Mara's chest tightened. She nodded, unsure if she had any words, any voice left. But for the first time in months, fear seemed tempered by something dangerously close to trust. The night stretched on, quiet but charged. Outside, the city thrummed with life and danger, but inside, Mara found a strange sanctuary beneath the unyielding gaze of the man who had claimed responsibility for her safety. And somewhere deep in the dark, Adrian watched her, calculating, protective, and entirely unafraid of the bond beginning to form between them. The next morning arrived with the city still wrapped in fog and uncertainty. Mara awoke to the faint hum of air conditioning and the muted sound of traffic far below. She lay under the heavy silk covers, her thoughts spinning like leaves in a storm. For the first time in months, she had slept, but the shadow of her past still clung to her. The knock on her suite door startled her. A soft, deliberate rhythm, different from the heavy steps of Adrian's guards. Her fingers trembled as she picked up her notebook. "Who is it?" she wrote. The door cracked open. One of Adrian's men stepped inside, expression grim. "Boss wants to see you, now." Mara's stomach knotted. She grabbed her coat instinctively. As they descended the private elevator, her mind raced. Why would Adrian summon her? She was safe. Weren't they supposed to stay out of danger, at least for today? When the elevator doors opened on the penthouse floor, the sight that greeted her stopped her. Breath. Adrian stood near the window, suit perfectly tailored, hands clasped behind his back. But his expression was stormy, uncharacteristically tense. A man stepped out from the shadows behind him, a figure Mara didn't recognize immediately. But Adrian's reaction told her everything. Tension, barely restrained fury, recognition bordering on disbelief. "This is..." Adrian's voice was low, controlled. "Someone I trusted." The man turned to Mara, and the blood drained from her face. The hunter. Her past had followed her here. Not random, not coincidence. It was him. And he had a connection to Adrian. Adrian's hand clenched into a fist. "He's the reason she's been running." The man smiled faintly, cold. A predator in a suit of civility. "I never expected to meet you under his roof, Mara." Mara's fingers shook violently. She couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe properly. The notebook, in her hands, became her lifeline. She scribbled quickly, "Why is he here?" Adrian's eyes flicked to her. "He's not just your problem," he said slowly, voice dangerous. "He's part of my world, and that makes him mine to deal with." The hunter stepped closer, eyes glinting with malicious satisfaction. I thought you'd like to see me again. After all, unfinished business tends to follow. Mara's chest constricted. She wanted to disappear, to vanish. But Adrian's presence was solid, unyielding. He took a measured step forward. "This ends now," he said, voice low, lethal. The hunter laughed softly, dark amusement curling around his words. "You'll regret getting involved." Adrian's gaze cut through him like a blade. "I don't lose to men who threaten women under my protection, especially ones from my own world." Mara's hand gripped her notebook so tightly that the paper crumpled. The notebook was useless now. Her words couldn't fight him. Only Adrian could. The hunter glanced at her, smirking. "She's fragile. Why would you risk your empire for someone like her?" Adrian's expression didn't waver. "Because she matters," he said simply. "And you will answer for every day you hunted her." Mara's eyes widened. She wanted to protest, to beg him not to engage. Her world had always been about hiding. Now she realized she was on the edge of something far bigger, far more dangerous. Adrian's hand brushed hers briefly, just enough to steady her. Not a touch of romance yet, just a claim. "You'll see," he murmured under his breath, meant only for her. "I don't lose people like you." The hunter's smirk faltered. Adrian's calm, controlled fury radiated outward, almost suffocating. Mara scribbled quickly. I don't understand." Adrian leaned closer, his shadow falling over her words. "You don't need to. I'll take care of him. You only need to survive and trust me." The hunter's laugh died in his throat. Adrian's gaze promised devastation. Mara's chest heaved. For the first time, fear mingled with something else. A fragile, trembling trust. And she knew the war for her survival had just begun. The safe house was quiet, almost eerily so. Mara sat on the edge of the bed, notebook balanced, on her lap as Adrian leaned against the wall, arms folded. The tension between them was palpable, like the storm that had followed her all these months had found a calm eye, and she was trapped inside it. "You can't keep everything inside," Adrian said softly, not looking at her. His voice carried a rare vulnerability, edged with a roughness that betrayed the man behind the boss. Mara's fingers twitched over her pen. She wrote quickly, I've always survived alone. That's all I know." Adrian's gaze shifted toward her, sharp yet unreadable. "And now?" he asked, a single word, loaded with more than question. She hesitated, unsure if she could reveal even that small truth. But the way he watched, her, the patience, the fire, the promise of protection, made her fingers move again. "Now I don't want to be alone." His lips pressed into a thin line, almost a smile. Not because she had spoken or written or obeyed, but because she had trusted him enough to reveal that thread of vulnerability. Adrian pushed off the wall, stepping closer. "Good, that's a start," he murmured. His eyes flicked down at the notebook and then back to her. "You're beginning to understand that someone can fight for you without needing you to fight first." Her heart fluttered. A dangerous, unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. Her silence, which had been her shield, now seemed like a fragile thread connecting her to him. "Trust me," he said softly. "This world will try to make you feel weak. But I don't want you weak. I want you ready. For me, for yourself." She nodded, words caught in her throat. Instead, she scribbled quickly, "I'm not ready, I'm scared, but I want to try." Adrian exhaled, a soft, quiet sound. Not frustration, not anger, respect, almost awe. "You don't have to be ready today," he said, his voice dropping lower, intimate. "But I will test your trust. Not because I doubt you, but because your life depends on it. And so does mine." Her chest tightened. She understood what he meant. The hunter from his world, the one who had followed her here, was still out there. Danger was real, and she was being asked to place her life entirely in the hands of a man she barely knew, yet whose presence both terrified and enthralled her. Adrian stepped even closer, shadow falling over her. His voice became a whisper. "You'll write it. To me, if you can't say it. Tell me what you fear. Tell me what you need. And I promise. I'll respond, always." She wrote, hands shaking violently. "I fear him. I fear myself. I fear losing control. I need you." The words trembled on the page, almost dissolving under her grip. Adrian's gaze softened, a rare crack in his armor, a glimpse of something more human beneath, the legend of the Mafia boss. He reached out, just enough to brush her fingers, steadying the notebook in her lap. "Good," he whispered. "That's more than anyone else has ever given me. That's real, that's honest, that's trust." Her eyes met his, and for the first time she noticed the tension in his jaw, the weight in his shoulders, the hidden pain beneath his control. Adrian Luca was a man of power, a predator, a ruler of a dangerous empire. But in this moment, she realized he was also capable of something fragile, something human. Her pen hovered again. She wanted to write, "Do you trust me?" But the words felt too fragile, too dangerous. Instead, she nodded slightly, and the smallest breath left her lips. Adrian's lips quirked faintly, not a smile, not a smirk, something softer like a promise. "Tomorrow," he said, stepping back, "we fight, together." Mara's heart pounded, both from fear and an unfamiliar thrill. The first test of trust had begun, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel completely alone. The safe house that had felt like a fragile sanctuary was suddenly a cage. Mara's heart raced in, her chest, a rapid drumbeat of fear and disbelief. She had trusted Adrian, trusted his judgment, trusted his world. But trust was a dangerous currency in the life they led. The first sign was subtle. A shadow moving too quickly, a whisper she couldn't catch, the faint, metallic scent of gun oil in the air. She froze mid-step, clutching her notebook, and something in her stomach screamed, "Danger." Adrian appeared in the doorway, coat sharp, posture rigid, eyes scanning the room. "Something's off," he muttered, voice low and controlled. He wasn't panicked. He never panicked, but Mara could feel the tension radiating from him like electricity. Before she could ask, a sudden crash shattered the quiet. The front door splintered, and masked figures poured in, weapons raised, movement precise, professional. Mara's scream caught in her throat. Her world had collapsed in a heartbeat. Adrian moved first, faster than she could follow, a shadow among shadows. He struck down one, intruder, flipping another with lethal precision. Every motion was calculated, cold, practiced, a dance of violence she had never seen before. "Run!" he barked, voice commanding. Mara didn't need to be told twice. She bolted toward the back door, notebook clutched to her chest. But the betrayal hit before she could reach safety. One of Adrian's men, the one who had seemed loyal, protective, blocked her path. Mara froze. Recognition hit her like a knife. This man had given her comfort, guidance. And now he was part of the attack. Adrian's voice rang out, a growl of fury. "Traitor!" The man smirked, gun aimed. "You shouldn't have brought her into your world, boss. She's a liability." Adrenaline surged through Mara. She ducked instinctively as a gunshot rang out. The walls shook. She scrambled toward a side corridor, adrenaline and fear sharpening every sense. From the corner of her eye, she saw Adrian fight like a force of nature. Every movement precise, lethal. But the betrayal stung deeper than any bullet could. A man he had trusted, someone from his own empire, had turned against him. And now, Mara's life was the weapon he wielded. She hid behind a door frame, trembling, trying to catch her breath. She scribbled furiously in her notebook. "He's one of yours. How could this happen?" Her fingers shook so violently that the pen skidded across the paper. She dared a glance back. Adrian had pinned down 2 intruders against the wall, his movements a blur of control and wrath. The air itself seemed to quiver around him, alive with power. "You stay close," he barked, looking in her direction. His voice, fierce and protective, was the only thing anchoring her. Mara nodded, heart hammering. She moved slowly, keeping low, following the path Adrian had cleared for her. The betrayal of his own man gnawed at the edges of the chaos. But she had no time to dwell. Gunfire echoed down the corridors as Adrian advanced, relentless, unstoppable. Each masked figure who thought they could take him down fell with precision. Mara kept to the shadows, her notebook pressed against her chest, her silent prayers whispered with trembling lips. Finally, after what felt like hours compressed into moments, the last intruder fell. Silence reclaimed the safe house. Smoke hung in the air, mingling with the copper scent of blood. Adrian appeared beside her, panting slightly, eyes dark, dangerous, and yet protective. "You're unharmed?" he demanded, voice low but trembling with something she couldn't name. Anger, fury, fear, all mixed. Mara nodded, tears streaking her face. She held up the notebook. "Yes, but they were your men." He glanced at her, jaw tight. His hand brushed her arm, not to scold, but to steady her trembling body. "They won't betray me again," he said, voice hard. "But tonight, you saw the cost of loyalty and the danger of trust." Her chest heaved. For the first time, fear, trust, and something dangerously close to devotion twisted together inside her. Adrian Luca had saved her, but at a price neither of them would soon forget. The aftermath of the attack left the safe house cloaked in silence. Mara sat curled on the edge of the bed, notebook open but unused, her hands trembling as adrenaline slowly faded. Shadows of the room felt heavier now, weighed down with what had just happened. Adrian moved silently across the room, surveying the aftermath with meticulous precision. Every overturned chair, every splintered wall, spoke to the violence that had erupted. But his gaze kept returning to her, unrelenting, fierce, protective. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly, approaching her. Mara shook her head, unable to speak. The words refused to come, but her eyes told him everything, the fear, the relief, the lingering panic. He knelt in front of her, slowly, his presence commanding yet careful. "Sit back," he murmured. "Let me make sure you're safe." Her hands shook as she moved toward him, allowing him to take the notebook from her lap. With one hand, he brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. And for a fleeting moment, the weight of the world seemed to vanish. "You need rest," he said softly. "Your body's not just carrying fear, it's carrying the aftermath of what you've endured." Mara opened the notebook, scribbling quickly. "I don't want to be weak. I don't know how to feel safe." Adrian read the words, eyes softening. "You're not weak," he said. "Not now, not ever. But trust me, you can let someone else carry the danger for a little while." Her chest tightened. Something in the way he looked at her, steady and unwavering, made the words "carry for me" feel like a promise she had never dared to hear. "You saved me," she wrote next, trembling. "I don't even know your name properly. And yet, you saved me." Adrian's hand hovered over hers for a moment before brushing lightly against her fingers, steadying the notebook. "I'm Adrian," he said softly, letting the name hang in the air like a shield. "And I will keep you safe, always." Her breath caught. She wanted to speak, to ask if he truly meant it, but the notebook was safer, easier. Her pen moved again. "Always. Can you really promise that?" "I can," he said, voice low, a dark undertone of intensity threading every word. "No one harms what I've claimed. Not my territory, not my people, not you." Her fingers trembled against the paper. His words, his presence, the quiet but absolute protection he offered. It was overwhelming, almost unbearable. Adrian leaned closer, careful, measuring. His proximity sent a shiver through her. "You don't have to say anything," he whispered. "Just trust me. That's enough for now." Her heart thundered in response. She wrote one final sentence, every stroke imbued with fear, hope, and something new. I trust you. He read it slowly, eyes locking on hers. For the first time, Mara felt the weight of his gaze not as a predator, but as someone who truly cared. His hand lingered over hers, brushing her knuckles, lightly, and the electricity between them was undeniable. "Good," he murmured. That means more than you know." And then, almost without warning, he reached for her face gently and pressed his lips to her forehead. A soft, protective kiss, full of care and silent promises. Mara's breath caught in her chest. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a claim, but it was intimacy. It was trust. Her hand shook, gripping the notebook as she felt the first fragile thread of connection stretch between them. For the first time in months, Mara felt a fragile warmth in her chest. Not safety, not merely protection, but something far more personal, something dangerously intimate. And as Adrian stepped back, his gaze lingering on her with unspoken intensity, Mara realized the first step of a dangerous, all-consuming bond had begun. The city outside the penthouse hummed with indifferent life, but inside, tension gripped every corner. Adrian Luca stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, jaw tight, hands clenched. Mara sat on the edge of the bed, notebook in her lap, heart hammering in a rhythm she could not control. Something had changed. Danger was no longer distant. It had infiltrated their sanctuary. Adrian's voice broke the silence. Low, dangerous. "He's made a demand." Mara's stomach dropped. She scribbled immediately. "Who?" "The man who betrayed me," Adrian said, turning to face her. "The one who led the attack last night. He wants something in exchange for your life." Her fingers froze mid-air. She couldn't speak. The threat hit her harder than any bullet ever could. What does he want?" she wrote frantically. Adrian's eyes darkened, a shadow passing over them. "You." Mara's chest constricted. "No." She shook her head violently. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But silence was all she had, and the notebook was her only voice. "I can't, I won't." Adrian stepped closer, closing the space between them. His presence was overwhelming, protective, but his eyes were stormy, calculating. "You won't have to. That's why I'm here." Her gaze met his, wide, terrified, searching. "How?" she wrote. He leaned down slightly, voice like dark velvet. "He thinks he can intimidate me by using you. But he doesn't understand. You're under my protection. He won't touch you without paying the cost in full. And I'll make sure it's more than he can survive." Her fingers trembled violently. She scribbled again. "But he's part of your world. What if you can't stop him?" Adrian's jaw tightened. His lips pressed into a hard line. "Then he'll find out exactly what happens when he betrays me. I don't forgive betrayal. Not in my empire. Not with my people. Not with you involved." A silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Mara's breath caught in her throat. She was terrified, but not for herself alone. She was terrified for Adrian, the man who had already placed himself in the crossfire for her. Her pen moved slowly this time, deliberately. "You're risking everything for me. Why?" Adrian's expression softened briefly, a flicker of something she rarely saw. Vulnerability. "Because you're not just someone to me," he said. "You're essential. If you're hurt, I'll lose. More than just a life. I'll lose control, and I never lose control." Mara's chest tightened. She tried to comprehend the depth of his words, the weight behind them. Her pen trembled as she wrote, I don't know how to handle this. He leaned closer, gently lifting her hand. "You don't have to handle it. Not alone. You never have. To handle it alone." The air between them was charged with an unspoken promise, one that went beyond protection. One that brushed dangerously against the edges of trust, power, and something far more intimate. Adrian stepped back, but his eyes never left hers. "I need to make him understand one thing. You're mine. Anyone who touches you pays the price. I won't let fear control you. And I won't Let anyone take what's mine. Mara's fingers shook, notebook trembling in her lap. She realized then that trust was no longer optional. It was survival. And in Adrian's presence, survival had taken on a new shape, one threaded with danger, intensity, and an unspoken bond that neither could deny. She wrote one final line, slow, deliberate. I trust you, always. Adrian's dark gaze softened just enough to reveal a flicker of something human beneath the Mafia boss, something dangerously close to devotion. The city hummed below them. Danger lurked in the shadows. But for the first time, Mara understood. As long as she was with him, she had a chance. And so did he. The abandoned warehouse loomed at the edge of the dockyard, swallowed by fog and silence. Rusted metal groaned in the wind, and the air smelled of salt, blood, and betrayal. Mara stood, just behind Adrian, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands, her breath shallow with fear. Adrian's men spread out around them, shadows with guns and unreadable expressions. But Adrian himself walked forward with deliberate calm, every step echoing through the hollow, building like a warning. Inside, tied to a chair beneath a flickering industrial light, sat Marco, the traitor. The man who had betrayed Adrian, the man who had tried to take her. Marco's head lifted at the sound of footsteps. His smirk was crooked, mocking, tinged with arrogance that only fools wore in the presence of Adrian Luca. You came, Marco said, voice hoarse. And you brought her. Good. Saves me the trouble. Adrian didn't react, didn't blink, didn't breathe wrong. He simply stepped into the light, removing his gloves one finger at a time with slow surgical precision. You asked for a meeting, Adrian said, voice low, dangerous. Let's call this your last conversation. Marco laughed, a dry, hollow sound. You can't control everything, boss. Not anymore. Your empire is slipping. The girl is proof of that. Mara's chest tightened. She felt exposed, like a blade had been pressed against her throat. She opened her notebook with trembling hands and scribbled, Why did you betray him? What do you want from me? Adrian glanced at her writing, jaw tightening, but he didn't stop her. Marco's eyes slid to her, predatory and cruel. Because your Mafia king over there has gotten soft. He let you in, protects you, risks everything for a silent little stray. He leaned forward, smiling viciously, and that weakness was my opportunity. Adrian stepped closer. Weakness? He repeated softly. Or loyalty you were too empty to. Understand? Marco spat blood onto the floor. She's nothing. A broken thing. A girl who can't speak. Why risk an empire for her? Adrian moved so quickly that the room itself seemed to flinch. He grabbed Marco by the jaw, forcing his head back. Watch your mouth, Adrian said, voice deadly calm. You misunderstand something. She is not my weakness. She is the reason I will destroy you without hesitation. Mara's breath hitched. Her heart pounded. She lowered her notebook, overwhelmed. Marco laughed again, though fear flickered in his eyes. You think you can stop what's coming? He rasped. You think she's safe? She's the message, the invitation. They're coming for both of you. Adrian froze. That one moment, one heartbeat, was enough to shift the air in the room. Mara sensed it immediately. A bigger threat, a larger enemy, someone more dangerous than Marco, someone watching, hunting. She quickly wrote, shaking, Who's coming? Who sent you? Marco's grin widened. He leaned back, satisfied. Ask your king, he said. He already knows. Adrian's jaw locked. Enough. He signaled to his men. They stepped forward, removing Marco's chair from the center of the room. Marco didn't fight, didn't plead. Not because he was brave, but because he believed. Something far worse was already on its way. As they dragged him out, Marco shouted one last time, voice echoing through the warehouse. You can't protect her forever, Adrian. They want her alive, do you hear me? Alive. The words ricocheted through the hollow space, slicing through Mara's already frayed nerves. Adrian turned to her. His expression, usually cold, controlled, held something else now. Fear. Not for himself, for her. He stepped toward her slowly, holding her trembling hands between his. "We're running out of time," he said quietly. "There are enemies you don't know about. They know you exist. They know you matter to me." Her throat tightened. She lifted the notebook with shaky fingers and wrote, "Adrian, am I the reason this war is starting?" He closed his eyes for a long, heavy moment. Then he looked at her and answered, "No, you're the reason I'll win it." His voice was a promise, a threat, a confession he wasn't ready to name aloud. The safe house, once a sanctuary, became a fortress under Adrian Luca's control. Mara sat, against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, notebook abandoned beside her. Every shadow seemed to move with intent, every creak of the floorboards a potential threat. Adrian's men patrolled the perimeter, but Adrian himself refused to leave her side. His presence was a constant ironclad promise. Yet even he could not see everything. The first warning was subtle, a faint scratching at the door, so soft Mara almost thought she'd imagined it. Then the lights flickered, plunging the room into near darkness. Adrian tensed instantly, every muscle in his body coiled, controlled, predatory. "Stay behind me," he murmured, eyes scanning the darkness. Mara obeyed without question, pressing herself against the wall as he moved forward. His hand rested lightly on hers, not just guidance, but a lifeline. A gunshot shattered the fragile quiet. Glass exploded from the nearby window as a masked intruder burst through, a silenced pistol aimed directly at Mara. Time slowed. Adrian lunged, grabbing her and throwing her to the ground as another shot rang. Out. The intruder fired again, and Adrian's fury became kinetic. Every movement precise, lethal. One hand disarming, one hand striking. Mara's heart pounded so violently she thought it might burst. She crawled to her notebook instinctively, pen trembling as she scribbled, "I'm scared. I don't want to die." Adrian read it over her shoulder in a heartbeat, voice low and sharp. "You won't. Not while I'm here." The intruder charged again, and Adrian met him with an almost inhuman force. He pinned the attacker against the wall, fist striking, then dragged him to the floor with controlled brutality. Mara's breath caught. She watched him, not just the Mafia boss, the predator, the dangerous man, but the man who had claimed responsibility for her life. Every punch, every calculated movement screamed one undeniable truth. She mattered more than anyone dared to matter. Another intruder appeared from the shadows, knife raised. Adrian's gaze flicked to Mara, calculating instantly. He shoved her behind a low table and spun toward the new threat. Mara's fingers trembled as she wrote, "Please, don't let him touch me." Adrian's lips pressed into a hard line. "He won't," he growled, eyes burning with a dangerous intensity that made her stomach twist. Within moments, the attackers were subdued, bound, unconscious. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Adrian turned to Mara, chest heaving slightly, eyes dark and smoldering. He reached for her, cupping her face gently, brushing a strand of hair from her trembling cheek. "You're safe," he said softly, but his voice was edged with raw emotion. "I will never let anyone hurt you, not tonight, not ever." Tears welled in Mara's eyes. She scribbled quickly, I don't know what I'd do without you." Adrian read the words and pressed a single finger to the page. "You don't have to imagine it," he murmured. "Because you'll never have to. I won't allow it, not now, not ever." He stepped closer, close enough that the heat of his body enveloped hers. Mara's chest rose and fell rapidly, breath mingling with his, heartbeats echoing in sync. "You trust me?" he whispered, almost a question. Her fingers moved slowly over the paper. "I trust you, completely." Adrian's eyes softened just for a moment, the first crack in his unyielding exterior. Then his hand brushed her hair, a fleeting protective touch. Outside, the city continued its indifferent hum. Inside, the safe house held two souls bound, together by fear, trust, and a rising, dangerous intimacy. And for the first time, Mara realized that surviving Adrian's world wasn't just about danger. It was about surrendering herself to the man who had claimed her heart without a single word. The safe house was quiet, but the night felt heavy with unspoken words. Mara sat on the edge of the bed, notebook closed for the first time in hours, her hands resting limply in her lap. The adrenaline from the attack had faded, leaving a raw ache in its place. A mixture of fear, relief, and something else she couldn't name. Adrian moved silently into the room, closing the door behind him. The shadows from the single lamp stretched across the walls, painting him in an almost ethereal darkness. "You're awake," he said, his voice low, threaded with a tension she had never heard before. Mara nodded, unable to speak. Words felt too fragile, too dangerous in the wake of everything that had happened. He stepped closer, gaze fixed on her. "You scared me," he admitted quietly. "When they came, I thought I could have lost you." Her chest tightened. She had never heard Adrian Luca admit fear. Not ever. The weight of it pressed against her, making her hands tremble. She opened her notebook, writing slowly, deliberately. "You're not supposed to care about me. You're a Mafia boss. You shouldn't." Adrian's dark eyes softened, catching her words. "I don't do things I shouldn't," he said. "But some people, they demand it." Mara's heart lurched. She swallowed hard, pen hovering over the page. "Demand it?" she wrote, almost too small for herself. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking, the air charged. "Mara," he whispered, voice rough and intimate. "I've never wanted anything the way I want this. You." Her breath caught. She wanted to speak, to tell him she didn't understand, that she wasn't ready, but words failed her. Instead, her fingers moved, writing with trembling urgency. "You want me?" Adrian's lips curved into a fleeting, almost predatory smile. He knelt before her, bringing his gaze level with hers. "I don't want. I claim," he said softly. "Every second you're in danger. Every second you hesitate, I claim it. And you." Mara's pulse thundered in her chest. The air between them was heavy, intimate, and dangerous. She scribbled quickly. I don't know if I'm ready." His hand lifted, brushing her hair from her face, tracing the curve of her jaw with the gentlest touch that held an unspoken promise of power. "You don't have to be ready," he said. "You only have to trust me. That's enough." Her fingers shook. She wanted to step back, to run, to hide, but her body betrayed her. She leaned slightly into him, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming in the darkness. Adrian's hand lingered near hers, fingertips grazing the paper. "Mara," he whispered, voice low and molten. "I can't protect you from the world if you don't let me in. Not completely. Not like this." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She scribbled one final line. I trust you, completely." The words were simple, but they carried everything: fear, surrender, hope, and a fragile intimacy that made her pulse spike. Adrian's eyes darkened with a fire that both terrified and enthralled her. He leaned closer, brushing his lips lightly against her forehead. A soft, possessive kiss that carried all the intensity of his promise and danger. Mara closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. For the first time, she didn't feel powerless. For the first time, the silence that had defined her life seemed not like a cage, but like a thread, connecting her to a man who had claimed her in every sense without words. He stepped back slightly, still close, still protective, his presence a tangible shield against the outside world. "We're bound now," he murmured, voice heavy with promise. "Not by fear, but by trust, and soon by more." Mara's heart fluttered violently. She didn't know what more meant, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of it. The city's skyline stretched beyond the penthouse windows, cold and indifferent, but inside, danger had already crossed the threshold. Mara stood near the window, notebook in hand, the events of the last nights replaying in her mind like a relentless storm. Adrian entered silently, dark suit pressed, expression unreadable. His eyes, usually sharp and predatory, held something heavier tonight: knowledge, calculation, and a flicker of unease. It's worse than we thought, he said quietly, voice low enough that only she could hear. Mara's pen moved before she could speak. Who is it? Adrian's jaw tightened. The attacks. The betrayal. Marco was just a pawn. Someone higher. Up. Someone with power in the city and influence in my empire. Wants you. Wants you alive. But controlled. He believes using you will control me. Her chest constricted. Alive. But as a weapon. She swallowed hard. Why me? She wrote. Adrian's gaze darkened, the shadows of the room falling across his face. Because you're mine, he said, low, deliberate. And because they know the one thing I will never compromise is your life. The notebook trembled in her hands. She scribbled frantically. Who is this person? How can they have power over you? Adrian stepped closer, the heat of his presence almost overwhelming. A rival I trusted. A man I never suspected until now. He's deep in my world, Mara. He's one of my own. And he's willing to burn everything to get to you. Fear coiled in her stomach. She clutched the notebook tightly. She had survived danger before. But this felt different. Personal, dangerous, intentional. Adrian's hand brushed hers briefly. A grounding touch. I won't let him win, he said. Not him. Not anyone. But you need to understand the gravity. This isn't just an attack. It's a message. Her pen moved hesitantly. What message? Adrian's dark gaze bore into hers. That even I, Adrian Luca, can be challenged. That even I can bleed. That even I can fail. But he underestimated one thing. Me. And he will regret it. The weight of his words sank into her. She looked down at her notebook, trembling. She had trusted him. She had surrendered in silence. But now, trust felt heavier, more dangerous. Because the world outside was closing in, Adrian stepped even closer, shadow falling over her. His voice softened, intimate and raw. I will protect you, he whispered. From him, from anyone. And you'll stay with me, safe, always. That's a promise you can cling to. She nodded slightly, pen trembling in her fingers. She wrote slowly, every letter carrying the fear and fragile hope she felt. I trust you, always, but I'm scared. Adrian's lips brushed her temple, a gentle, possessive touch that carried more than comfort. Good, he murmured. Fear is natural, but so is trust. And now, you see who the real enemy is, and why I won't fail. Mara's heart pounded in her chest. The city beyond their walls hummed on, unaware. But the enemy within Adrian's empire had been revealed, and the stakes had escalated beyond anything she had imagined. Outside the penthouse, the night deepened. Danger lingered in the shadows, watching, waiting. But inside, Mara felt the first fragile certainty that even in the heart of betrayal, even in the grip of fear, Adrian Luca would stand between her and the world, and she would follow him into the dark. Her pen hovered over the page one last time. Then, we fight, together. Adrian's eyes softened, just for a heartbeat, before the hard, protective resolve returned. Together, he echoed. And the word carried a promise that neither betrayal, nor enemy, nor fear could break. The dawn was a pale, reluctant light over the city. Mara stood at the edge of the rooftop, notebook in hand, wind whipping her hair around her face. She felt the weight of the nights. Behind her, the attacks, the betrayals, the fear. And yet, she no longer felt powerless. Adrian approached silently, shadowed and commanding as ever. His presence was both a shield and a fire she could not resist. You're awake early, he said, voice low, threaded with intensity. Mara shook her head, breathing the cold morning air. She wrote quickly, almost with defiance. I don't feel like a victim anymore. Adrian's dark eyes softened, and yet held the storm that always lingered in him. Good, because you're not. Not now, not ever. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. You've Survived everything I thought might break you. And you're still here. Stronger than I imagined." Her fingers trembled, gripping the notebook. She wrote, I want to fight, not just survive." Adrian's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "That's the spirit," he murmured. "And you won't fight alone. Not ever. But now, you'll be the reason they fear me. And you'll be the reason I fight harder." The air between them shifted. Danger and desire mingled, a dark thread weaving through the morning light. She realized fully that she had grown, not just surviving the attacks, the betrayal, the threats, but thriving in the shadow of the man who had claimed her heart. Adrian reached for her hand, and for the first time, she didn't hesitate. Their fingers intertwined, solid, unbreakable. "Mara," he said softly, "tonight, the enemy thinks they have control. They don't, you and we define the rules now." She wrote one final line, "Then let them come." Adrian read it and let out a low, dangerous laugh, the kind that sent shivers through her. "That's my girl," he whispered. A sudden noise echoed in the distance, a reminder that the world outside was still dangerous. Mara's chest tightened, but she no longer felt helpless. She had been silent for so long, but her silence had become a weapon, a shield, and now a strength. Adrian stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You've learned well," he said, voice low, intimate. "The world will never underestimate you. Again, and neither will I." Her heart raced, and she wrote once more, slower, every letter carrying the weight of trust, fear, and desire. "I trust you, and I'll stand by you, always." Adrian's eyes softened, a flicker of something human breaking through the storm that was his. "Aura." He leaned in, lips brushing hers in a soft, possessive kiss. Not a claim, but a promise. Mara's breath hitched. For the first time, she realized she could survive with him. Not just because of him. The wind howled around them, carrying the first hints of dawn. Mara felt it, the silent strength that had grown inside her, the fire that could no longer be contained. She was no longer the frightened, mute girl who had written a desperate plea. She was a force, a partner, a danger in her own right. Adrian's hands rested lightly on her shoulders, grounding her, protecting her, claiming her in the quietest, most intimate way. "Together," he murmured. "Always." Mara's fingers tightened around his, notebook now closed. She didn't need to write anything else. Words were no longer necessary. Her silence had become strength, and her bond with Adrian unbreakable. The city stretched below them, oblivious. But up here, on this rooftop, Mara and Adrian stood, unshakable, two forces intertwined, ready for whatever the world dared throw at them next. For the first time, Mara knew it with certainty. She would never be silent again. The city sleeps below, unaware of the danger, the passion, and the promises forged in the shadows. Mara has found her voice. Adrian has found his reason. And together, they've defied betrayal, fear, and the darkness that threatened to consume them. But this story doesn't end here. There are battles yet to fight, secrets still to uncover, and a love that refuses to be silenced. If Mara and Adrian's journey into danger, desire, and trust captivated you, make sure you don't miss the next chapter of this dark romance saga. Subscribe now to follow every twist, every betrayal, and every stolen moment of passion. Join the story, stay in the shadows, and experience the world of the silent woman wrote a plea. Her Mafia boss responded in full, only here, where danger and desire collide. Your next heartbeat, your next secret, your next thrill is just a subscription away.